In this video, I want to talk you through how to print on fabric, specifically really textured canvas fabric like this. I'm going to talk to you about tools, about inks, about fabric, about pressure, everything you need to know to get a good print on whatever fabric project you have lined up for yourself. It is pretty different from printing on paper. If you are new to block printing and want to learn how to carve a block, how to roll out your ink, how to print on paper, I encourage you to head over to my beginner block printing video. I go into all of those details in that video. This video, I'm really going to focus in on just the printing process on fabric and the differences between printing on paper and printing on fabric. So, what are the differences when you are printing on paper versus printing on fabric? The first one is your ink choice. There are inks that are made specifically for printing on fabric, and that's so that you can wash your garment or your tote bag or whatever you've made without all of your block printing just washing away. You definitely need to pay attention to what inks you're using. In this video, I'm going to go through how I use screen printing ink for fabric for printing these starfish, but you can also use oil-based inks that are made for fabric. With either of those, you want to make sure that you read the label on your fabric ink, because a lot of fabric inks have one important step at the end, and that is once your fabric ink is dry on your fabric, you want to go ahead and heat set that design onto your fabric. So that means you literally pull out your iron, you iron over it, and that is like the final step to kind of lock the ink with the fabric so that you don't wash it away the next time you clean whatever your item is. I would say the second biggest difference between printing on fabric and printing on paper is that your fabric has more texture, whether it's a t-shirt, which means that it is a knit fabric, or it's like my tote bag where it's a woven fabric. It's gonna have more texture, most likely, than a lot of the papers that you're gonna print on. And so that means you need to put a little bit more ink on your block, and you need to put a little bit more pressure on your fabric to get a good, clean print. And then the last thing I would say, and I'll go through this when I go to materials, but when you're printing on fabric, you need to have like a little bit of a bounce. So your printing block, your fabric, and then the surface you're printing that's underneath you, your table, you need something between your fabric and your table. And you could use craft foam, you can use quilt batting, but you need something that's a little bit squishy, and that helps you get a better contact between your stamp and your fabric. And that's going to make sure that all of your prints are nice and crisp and clear. Okay, so that's just a few starter tips before we get into it. Now I'm going to go to the top-down view, and we're going to go through all of the materials that I'm going to use in this video. Let's go. For this whole tutorial, I am working toward making this tote bag. So my fabric is pre-cut to the shape that I need to sew this to. I'll include the link to this particular pattern if you're interested, but just so you know, that's why my fabric is kind of a strange shape. So I have screen printing inks. These two are a brand called Jacquard, and then I'm also going to use this fluorescent screen printing ink that's made by Speedball. I like to print fabric with screen printing ink because I've just had more success with this method than I have with an oil-based ink. So these inks are much, I'd say, softer than like a oil-based block printing ink. So you can see it like moves. So it's more liquid. To apply the ink to my blocks, I use these little stipplers. This is literally a sponge on a stick. I got these from Amazon. I've gotten before like a sampler pack that's like lots of different sizes. I'll include a link to that below. I have some plastic utensils that I'm going to use to scoop out my inks. I am going to use this tray to hold my inks. I have already carved these 3 starfish blocks. I carved these quite a while ago and I wanted to reuse them. The tote bag I'm making is meant to be a big beach bag, so it just seemed like the perfect thing to use. If you are unfamiliar with how to carve blocks like this, I would say go back to my block printing for beginners video and I talk you through the whole process. I'm going to be printing on this striped fabric and it's really heavyweight, so I'm going to do some test printing to see how it goes, because I am a little bit concerned that all of that texture is going to potentially cause a problem. You can also see that I did some testing to see which inks I like. I really like the idea of using this neon ink. I love pink and orange. So I'm going to use this orange and this dark pink. So then my other bag, I'm going to be using the fluorescent orange and this navy ink. Other tools you're going to want a Baron. This just helps you kind of push down really hard. I have some scrap paper. It's just newsprint. When I'm printing on fabric, I like to put something soft underneath, and this is just craft foam. And you can see that it's been used before. It's fine. That ink isn't going to transfer onto my other fabrics, so you can see it's been used a lot. So I'm going to put this down, and then I could even put a piece of paper on top of that, but this just gives you give so that your stamp kind of gets better contact with your fabric. So after I cut out my sewing pieces, I had these 2 pieces left, and I'm going to use these to do my test printing, just to see kind of what kind of pressure do I need, how much ink do I need to get good prints on this particular fabric. So I would say if you're going to undertake fabric printing, make sure you have a little bit of a scrap so that you can at least do some test printing before you move on to your actual final piece. The first thing that I'm going to do is just decant some of my ink into this tray. I'm going to just scoop out some of the orange, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the navy. The amount you take is going to depend on what you're printing and how much printing you're doing. I didn't mention before, but I also just have like some paper towel, for this kind of thing. I'm going to just put a piece of paper over top, and then I have this fabric. It does have all these little threads, so I'm going to make sure none of those are on the bottom, because if this was on the bottom and I printed, it would mean that I would get uneven contact between my block, the ink, and the fabric. So I would probably have like that thread shape show up somehow. So I want to make sure all those little threads are kind of brought to the front. I think I will start with this guy. I'm going to take my stippler, and I'm going to just gently dab in the screen printing ink. And then I'm going to let some of it come off. So I'm going to have this little kind of working puddle over here. And that's just to make sure I don't flood my stamp with so much ink that the ink goes into all of my little carved areas. So then we're just going to dab, 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 dab. And this is where I might decide, having a bigger stippler sponge might be faster, but I always like to kind of start small and work my way up. I'm trying to make sure that I cover the entire stamp. I don't mind that there's this like little line. Some people want their stamping to be completely crisp and clear. I don't mind. This is a handmade thing, so I'm okay with those little kind of, it's called noise, showing up. So this is my first go with this ink and this stamp. So I kind of am already like anticipating it maybe not going perfectly. Once you put it down, it's down. I like to use my pinkies to kind of figure out where exactly I want it to land. Drop it down and don't lift it up again. And so here's where you can use the Baron. If you don't have a Baron, you can use the heel of your hand, and you're just wanting to make sure that you press everywhere so that you're stamping all parts of your, whatever your motif is. And then you just pull up. Ooh, that's not bad. So that's my first test print. You can see the ink is much clearer, obviously, on the white parts of the stripes, but I like the way it looks across the other color. So that's very exciting. I still want to test this one because you can see it has a lot of little lines. This is called a brittle star. So it's an actual kind of starfish. And I'm going to do the same thing again. Just kind of load up the sponge. So you can see I have flooded it slightly. We can't see this line I've created. So I might just take my fingernail, actually, pull some of that ink off. This is why I'm doing my test printing. I haven't printed this particular block for quite some time, and I've never printed it with screen printing ink for fabric. So it's good to go through and do your testing. So again, I'm using like my other fingers to kind of give me time to move it around and get it right where I want. And then I'm going to just set it down and use pressure. Ooh, okay. I mean, it's a little bit flooded here, but that's okay. That's good to know. So I need to be really light on the ink with this particular stamp because it has all of these little like hash marks. This guy is called a bat star, another kind of starfish. And I think I'm going to try this one in blue as well. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Maybe stamp it up here. I'm going to give pressure. Nice. I like that. I do kind of want to go back in and clean up a little bit of this stamp, or maybe I can wash the stamp and then be really careful when I'm inking it, but I think it will probably be easier if I just carve away a little bit of that block, and then I won't have all of this noise. Specifically this I'm not happy with. So I have just washed off this stamp with tap water and a little bit of gentle soap. So I want to go in and I'm going to just take some of my carving tools and quickly carve away a little bit of this raised area that I don't want printing. I carved this block, gosh, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. So this just shows you that, like, don't get rid of any of the blocks that you've carved, because, you know, you might want to come back to them. And so I can show in some other video, but I have a way that I store all of my blocks so that they don't get damaged, and so that I can come back to them if I ever decide that I want to. And this is a normal part of my process. I always do like a test print, and then inevitably in the test print I'll see, oh, there's some things that I don't like. I'm going to go back in and do some cleanup. I just want to review a few things that people can sometimes get wrong when they're printing on fabric. I have made all these mistakes myself, so if you make them, just know that you're not alone. That is, I have not put enough pressure on my stamp. I have not put enough ink on my stamp, or some combination of those two things. Maybe I didn't put enough pressure across the whole stamp, and then one area didn't print as dark. I have a good example of that here. So this particular starfish, this one, you can see that I missed a little bit of pressure. So I didn't do as good a job at like pressing everything down really hard. And remember, like I said at the beginning of the video, the last thing you want to do after all of your ink is dry is you want to go ahead and iron to set your ink. Usually what I say is the amount of heat that your fabric can withstand, that's how much heat you want to put on your printing area. And I often will put a piece of cloth between the two, between my iron and the object, just to protect my iron, but that's something you can do to kind of protect things. You can also put your print side down and iron from the back, but I like to iron from both sides, just to be sure. I like the, you know, the belt and braces approach to my ironing. Okay, so I went ahead and cleaned off all of my stamps just so I have kind of a fresh start when I start this printing process. There's no way that I can show this entire piece of fabric in this like limited screen recording situation I have, but just know that like it's very, very big. I'm printing off of the edge of a desk, and so some things you want to think about. If I start printing this side first and have the rest of the fabric hanging off the edge of the desk, that means that I'm gonna have to start bringing everything up to the top of my desk. So that's not a great plan for me. So what I'm gonna do is roll up my fabric, and I'm gonna slowly bring it down in front of me, which also means that I need to be careful not to lean on it because the ink could get on my own clothes. So I'm gonna try to just fill the space, not so it's like so tightly packed. I want the bag to have starfish kind of all over it. The other thing that's gonna get tricky, what I might do is kind of print all of one side and then let that dry and turn it around and print all of the other side. Again, my surface is limited, so I can't really stretch out all the way to one side. I also want some of my printing to go off the edges. I don't want it to like have these kind of areas where it stops. So I am gonna print off the edges of my fabric. So when I'm doing that, I'm gonna have a piece of paper on the edge so that at least it's like landing on this piece of paper and not on my piece of foam. And then you have to be careful, you know, when you move this piece of paper, not getting ink on your fabric. All that to say, it's a lot to think about, so take your time. And, you know, it's supposed to be fun. I have made this tiny blue pencil mark. That is the midpoint of the front of the bag. I think that's going to be kind of helpful for me when I line things up. I don't want all of the starfish to be like straight down the middle of the bag, but it does give me a little bit of a guide about where I am. I'm going to start with the fluorescent orange, and I want it to be somewhere near the middle, so I'll probably put it somewhere around here. And that's going to be my starting point where I build off of. And some people use a roller, like a little like paint roller, to put the ink on. I know there are lots of other really talented, experienced printers who that is their primary method of application. I've had more successful prints, I should say, with this sponge stippler method. So here we go, my first starfish on the actual bag. There we go, we're in it now. It's a bit lighter than some of the other prints, so that's good to know. I could have put more ink on there. Some of these little stamps are going to be much darker than others and some much lighter. I am completely okay with that. I'm trying to keep them a little bit far apart because I think it's okay. So I set it down. Oh, and I moved it. Gosh, you get to see all of my mistakes. This is perhaps the back of the bag. So it is a little bit of a double print, but I'm okay. Again, we live and we learn. I'm gonna have it go off over here. So I put my piece of paper down. Not gonna lift it up like I did last time. All right, first 3 stamps done. I'm just gonna keep on trucking. Okay, so you got to see me print my fabric. I had pre-cut it into the pattern pieces for my tote bag. You don't have to do it that way. You could print your whole big piece of fabric and then cut it out however you want. It doesn't matter if you cut your pattern pieces in advance or if you print your whole piece of cloth as one. Either way, you're gonna end up with a beautifully printed item that you're gonna make into something else. Now, it took me a while to get my bags made, but I did wanna show you. So they're nice and roomy. I did a little fun interior. It also has a pocket, 2 pockets really. And I made a pink one too. So here's the pink one. This one I've had like folded up, but it gets really slouchy, so these sides can come out. Can fit tons of towels, tons of stuff in there. I'll be sure to link the sewing pattern below if you want to make the same bag, but you could make literally any tote bag that you like. I hope you have fun. I hope that this video helped you. I hope it gave you a little bit of information that you need to start printing your own fabric. And if you have any questions after watching, please put them in the comments. I am more than happy to share the knowledge, or just say, I have no idea how to do that. Either way, you'll have somebody to kind of commiserate with. If you are enjoying these videos, I would love it if you would hit the thumbs up button, and if you really like my channel, please subscribe. It lets the algorithm know this is a good video and people are enjoying it. And I will see you next time, and happy printing until I do. Bye.